So the first reading we're going to talk about is Visualizing Literacy, Building Bridges with Media by David L. Bruce. So this reading was basically the case study of male students who didn't succeed in typical literary settings. This means that they weren't really the best at traditional writing when it comes to print. They usually had not really the best grades. They ended up dropping out of classes a lot or not even coming to classes and not overall focusing very well. So where these boys weren't able to focus on their literary aspect, they actually happened to succeed very well in visual aspects. These boys were really great at doing visual effects and creating visual media. So in this classroom setting, literacy is usually seen as the most common and most accepted form, and it's usually seen more in print instead of visualizing. There's more of a hierarchical structure where print's the top, where if you don't understand print and you're not very that literate in print, you're not seen to do well in school. Visual forms of literacy aren't usually accepted as well. So this study was basically a year-long study where the purpose was to what extent do lower achieving students engage with complex compositional strategies, particularly when composing a video project in the context of a media-based language arts elective. Basically, this means, are they able to understand what they're doing and follow the basic literary format that is expected in classes in a more visual format rather than a more print-based format. So one explanation for a reason why they might do better in a visual format is because they're able to physically see what's happening. They're able to visualize what they're doing instead of writing it where they might not be able to visualize it as well. Some people are different types of learners, which means that some people could be a visual learner where they learn better by seeing things in front of them, not really words. Some people can be a tactile learner where they're actually better with touching something and they have to be more hands-on, whereas some people might just be better just by reading it through a book and memorizing it. So they were tapping more into the visual learner aspect to see if these students who excel at visual aspects could actually get good grades and get passionate about what they're doing and their writing in a more visual setting. So students who rely more on visual instead of textual expression have the same basic functioning for composing their thoughts through writing. So you need to be able to basically brainstorm. You need to have reflection, feedback, a planning stage. You need to be able to do rough copy and storyboarding. And they're able to get all of this, just not when they're trying to write it down, it seems. So they're able to have the basic framework. All that really changes is the medium. Instead of working from writing on a piece of paper or pen to paper, they're able to express their thoughts more in a visual way, in which, in this case study specifically, they did it through making a music video. So they were assigned, of course, to make a music video and compare the process of writing from making that music video back to the writing that they traditionally do in classes. Of course, they compared their music videos to other popular music videos to see how well they're doing and the progression that they're making. But through the interviewing with some of the students, they actually found out that a lot of them found it easier to express their message and their emotions through using a visual thing instead of using it on paper. So they were able to notice that they weren't able to notice, but they kind of did it unconsciously. They noticed the process that they had to go through. So they were able to do a planning feedback stage. They were able to do everything that you need for a traditional compositional development. It's just they weren't conscious of it. They just thought that that's what goes into filming. And they found that they liked doing filming more because they were actually able to express themselves a lot of the times what these boys had problems with was that they knew what they wanted to express. They knew the emotions that they wanted to express, but they were having a hard time finding the right word to how to express it, or like the right phrasing for the idea so that they knew what they were talking about on paper. But through the use of a visual media, they could just express what was happening and they could get the main idea across. For example, in the article, they were talking about how he could hold his hands up and it could experience grieving and loss, whereas they wouldn't have been able to experience that on paper because they wouldn't know how to start describing it. So during the creation of their music video, the boys went through the constructive steps, of course, such as reflection, feedback, planning, revision, without thinking of it, and that brought a lot of the struggle that they actually have with typical traditional printed writing, and it diminished it where they could actually go through the stages and go through the process of what it takes to be doing compositional writing, and they were able to do it in a way where they could utilize all the steps and actually manage to express what they were trying to express, but more in a visual form than a printed form. One way that I thought that the topic talked about in the article could be useful is for students who suffer with ADHD. ADHD basically makes it impossible for students to really sit down and focus as well as other students in their class. So of course this means if you have to do a writing essay in the time period, this is incredibly hard for them to actually be able to focus and to write well. So by giving them more of an option to do the same assignment but just more in a visual setting, it could give them more of a creative outlet that can actually work with them better, because this actually lets them still do the whole compositional and constructive process that comes with writing, and they have to go through the same steps in order to express their idea. But it lets them do it in a more creative, hands-on outlet, which is usually what most ADHD people do. So they exceed expectations, I guess you can say. They go and do better when it's something hands-on, and it's not just focusing all of your attention on one main area. So by being able to have this hands-on experience and be able to focus on multiple things, such as, oh, we have to do storyboarding, you got to do the audio, you have to do the editing, doing all of that comes with the process of making a visual piece of artwork or a piece of writing, then that could actually provide them a better experience so that they could express themselves more. They wouldn't have to focus all of their attention on one thing. They could take a break, come back to it when they find that they're motivated to do it. So this also, in addition to the students that suffer with ADHD, this could also be very helpful for non-native English-born speakers. So this is for any of the students who are still currently learning English, or maybe they know English but not to the extent in which someone who was born in a native English-born country would know the English. So whereas someone who was speaking it since they were born could find the words that would help best express what they're trying to get at, someone who is not English-born might struggle coming up with the correct wording that they want to use. So by using more of a visual setting and a visual medium, they're able to kind of express their purpose, express the emotion in their piece of writing where they might not have been able to use the words that they were looking for to begin with. So this also can help people who are a native-born English speaker, but just have problems coming up with word choice, or maybe just have problems processing the English language at times. For example, one concept, well, not really a concept, but like one type of student I was thinking could positively be benefited by this type of writing would be someone with dyslexia. So because they have dyslexia, they don't really have it where all the time they could write perfectly fine. They might end up getting words mixed up, they might get letters mixed up, and that could take time just going back to fix it, and not to mention the struggle of being like they know the word but they just can't express it fully. So if they don't really have to write everything down, then they could do it in a more positive way where they can still express themselves without the struggle of having to write everything down. And this still allows them to go through the same composition, the same steps in writing. It's still the same basic writing process, but it takes away and eases their process of doing it so that they could actually not struggle as much. So not everyone, of course, is going to adhere to the hierarchy of the literary system in the school district. So it's important to take the people who are weaker in writing and actually take them into consideration instead of just writing them off. So not everyone is always going to excel in the same thing as everyone else. Some people are going to be better at print. Other people might not be their strong suit. They might actually end up suffering a lot when it actually comes down to sitting down, putting pen to paper, and writing out their thoughts or feelings in a cohesive idea. Whereas if you do it, for example, if you have to do a book report, some people could be perfectly fine doing a book report, going through the writing process, synthesizing the ideas from the book and putting it down on paper, getting the main ideas down. Whereas other people might get the main ideas from the book but might have problems synthesizing it and putting it in their own words. And this might give them another option which they could utilize and actually work with. So students who do suffer with writing and have struggles writing, it isn't as rare as you think. There are a lot of students that suffer with it, and they do need to be taken into consideration. So this is an option that is available. Of course, there's other options. For example, if you could think of another option, what option would you think of for helping students who might not be the best at writing in print? At the end of the article, Bruce proposes that it might be beneficial to see writing from a more complementary approach rather than a hierarchical approach. Do you happen to agree with this? Should there be more of an emphasis on writing not from a print-based view? For example, should there be more of an emphasis on writing in more of a visual aspect, kind of like what this article is talking about? So how could this help students who struggle finding the right words when they write an essay? This could especially be beneficial for a lot of students who don't have English as their first language and are struggling to find the right words for it. They already don't have as intensive a vocabulary as someone who might be speaking it since they were born. So by taking more of a complementary approach to it, you can understand that some people might not be the best with writing, and this could actually be a way for them to get their message out there and actually go through the writing process without really having to struggle with the vernacular and actually forming the sentences.
And the second reading that was required of us to read this week was called Speaking with Dance and Not in Words and Writing. And this was about a case study about one 8th grade boy named John who was of the native descent. And they essentially were looking at ways that he could bring his native cultures and his native identities into the classroom and into his work. And more specifically, the dances, the native dances that he participated in and his family participated in and he saw. So throughout this case study, the authors collected a lot of data over 8 months. And the 3 ways that they collected data was direct interviews from John and his teachers. So they went in and they interviewed him, asked him different questions about his work and his native background, and then collected that. The second was notes from observations of when the authors went into the classroom and they saw what they saw. And then the third was artifacts or work samples from John's work that took place in the classroom. So The main theme that I took away from this writing was that John really enjoys the native dancings that he has participated in, and he doesn't see that at all in his classroom. So he wants to not only educate himself on it, but use it to inform his teachers and his classmates about it. So John stated in his autobiography that was later created, he said, "Our dances were a sign to keep the Indian within us. 'Cause back when white men wanted to Americanize the Native Americans, they wanted all native children to get sent out to boarding schools to learn the white customs, and many changed their ways of life to the white man ways, and discriminated the ones who still spoke their native language and stayed in their native cultures also." So because this was brought up very early in the writing, I took it as John and his family want to keep the native traditions in school because they feel like they're being too Americanized, or that their cultures and stuff are not being respected as much as another ones would. So like I had mentioned before, dancing is something that John definitely brought up a lot, and that was one of the major overall things that was looked at throughout this case study. But aside from that, John also mentioned that he brought in flyers for his class, like pamphlets on the different dances, and he even brought in DVDs to show his class some of the different dances that maybe he's never even participated in or can do, but still wanted to make a point to show those. And then aside from that, he also spoke of the clothing that they would wear for the dances, like the significance of that, if there was like a certain uniform or a certain color that they might wear for certain dances. And then another big thing that he talked about was the tribal decoration. So this was things from like props at the dances to like facial decor and stuff like that. One thing that I thought that I really enjoyed hearing was that he said that when he was dancing, he felt that he was himself, and he felt that school should incorporate this too, that they should find ways to have the students feel more like themselves while they're in school. At the end of this case study, the authors found many different findings as to why this was a good idea and to how it changed the classroom for the better. There was a couple that really stuck out to me that I really related to. The first being that teachers and educators are struggling with variety in the classroom, and that they might not even notice that they're struggling with this. So, like in this example, they were just doing the basic ways of teaching. Here's what I'm going to teach, you write something back, and I'll assess it and give it back, and that's it from there. But instead, they brought John in and they had him almost teaching the class things and introducing different things. And they might not have recognized that they could do this before because they just have never done it in the past. So variety is something that, especially with the new Common Core situation, teachers might just be given material and said, this is the material that you need to teach them, and this is how it works. This is how it's going to work to teach the kids, and they're not expanding the way that they could educate the students. And going off of that, another thing that I realized from this passage is that you might get more responses from students by doing different things, especially younger kids. They get bored very easily, and I mean, even now, I'm a college student, and I get sick of just writing a paper and doing something. I'm not excited about learning certain things anymore because it's just routine. So through things like this, we're having dance and other students, sharing their personal experiences. It could really create a larger response and a larger interest for both the students and the teachers. The third finding that I grew the most liking for was that John talked a lot about how dancing and bringing his native culture into the classroom made him feel very at home and very welcomed and very appreciated. And I think that this concept is sometimes lost in the classroom because there's so much going on and there's so much things going on that teachers don't have a second or the realization to stop and see what can I do to make sure that every student is feeling as most comfortable as they can. So in this case study, the classroom and the teachers and John did a good job at making sure that he was appreciated and felt at home. Going off that and having students feel very at home and very welcomed in the classroom, I was able to reach out to a friend of mine who was actually a dance major for some time here at UB. And I sat down with her and I just asked her things like, what did you like about it and what are your thoughts on, having dance as a class in school and bringing that. And pretty much a big point that she brought up was that oftentimes, especially in college, we're forced to take all these academic classes that we really don't enjoy, and they're overly structured. It's the same material and the same schedule every semester, every year, every class, over and over and over again. And teachers aren't really taking the time to pause and see, like, oh, what can I change, and what might this class be different than my previous classes. Another thing that she brought up is probably the most obvious, that in a dance class you're able to express yourself without words. So for a student who might not be a strong writer or who might not be a confident writer, might be extremely confident in a different way. In this situation, she's confident in a dance class. She's confident expressing herself through that, and that was the same with John as well. So I think there's many different ways to have students be able to express themselves in the way that is most comfortable for them and still have it work out as an assessment. Another thing that she talked about a lot is you don't have to just sit there and write a passage and think of words on words to write, or you don't have to go through a PowerPoint and try to make it work. Like you can change it and structure it to a way that best fits you. One thing that I always will remember doing was in elementary school, I believe it was 4th or 5th grade, every year the school held a cultural festival where that one specific grade, every student in that grade would be assigned a certain location. So whether it was like America or Russia or France or something like that, and they would do research on them, and then we would all get together and do a showing of it one night. And what was unique about that project from others was that not only were we encouraged to create a poster where we had to put like the main facts that everyone would like to know about the location, but we also were encouraged to make food that was common in that area. So if it was America, like they would bring in hamburgers or something like that. And then they were also encouraged to bring in like clothing and music. And I think in doing this, it excites the students. It's something different. It's something that we looked forward to almost all year because it was, exciting. And everyone was able to attend it. So they all were able to attend and, bring food. And for little kids, like that's very exciting. It kept our attentions and it kept our interest because we were able to do something and work so hard on it and then show it off to everyone else. And it wasn't just the basic sitting there and writing a paper or reading a book about it and having to spit out the information on a test. So I think other schools could do things like this. And like for in John's situation, he could come in and do a dance for everyone, and that would make him feel very at home and very welcomed and appreciated by the other students. So a couple questions that I came up with that if you guys are interested in answering, is do you think teachers and educators should incorporate other people's ethnic backgrounds? Do you think they should take time out of the lesson plans and stuff like that to do something like this, or do you think that they should just stick to their Common Core lesson plans and their schedules? The second question is, what are your thoughts on dancing in schools and replacements of writing assignments? So in the situation that I talked about before, what are your thoughts on it? Do you think it would work, or do you think that there's too many students that wouldn't be able to relate to that to do it? And then the third question that I came up with was there a time that your class used physical expression or as an assignment instead of a writing piece? And if so, think about the point of it and think about why your teacher might have chose to do this instead of something else. And share your thoughts on it.